get 2 for 1 today. Glenn, we've made it to Broadway, so there you go. I think this is as close as we're going to get to be on the stage here. Let's get started. Hello, my name is Maria Gutierrez. I am VP of Engineering at FreeAgent. At FreeAgent, we build accountancy software for freelancers, small businesses. We help them kind of be in control of their finances. We are based in lovely Edinburgh, in Scotland, but about 25% of the engineering team works remotely from home in different parts of the UK.
I'm Glenn Vanderburg. I'm VP of Engineering at First. We use predictive analytics to help real estate agents make more effective use of their marketing dollars. Our company is located in Durham, North Carolina, which is there. But I live in Dallas, and about 1/3 of our team works remotely. The two of us recently spent 5 years as colleagues helping to manage a large, widely distributed software development team at Living Social. And during that process, we kind of discovered a shared passion for figuring out how to do distributed teams well and solve those problems while we were making a bunch of mistakes.
So at Living Social, it started with offices in Washington, D.C., and as the team grew, we opened engineering offices in Boulder and Portland. But still, the majority of the engineering team, at one point we were up to 200 engineers. We were working from other parts kind of the US, all over the US, but also kind of from the UK, Mexico, Brazil, and even eventually China, India, and Australia.
Between us, we've been part of several distributed teams for about 11 years. And we're big fans of the way that works. And we're big advocates of working in a distributed style. But whenever we say things like that you know, distributed teams are great, a lot of people seem to hear things like this, you know. If they can do it, anyone can do it, or they're just as good in exactly the same ways, and it'll be easy. In other words, they don't think there'll be any trade-offs.
But this is not, you know, those things don't need to be true for distributed teams to be successful. So, but these other things that we see here, kind of the opposite, kind of, we also believe that they are not true. So there's some comments from some companies that we've heard over the last few years that have decided to stop doing distributed work. So whether it is IBM more recently, kind of Yahoo, or even Zarly. What we understand is that, you know, distributed teams are not for everybody. There has to be a commitment, but it doesn't mean that it can't work. You don't need to be shoulder to shoulder with somebody to be able to be efficient and successful at running a team.
These statements show that what we see from those statements is that those people aren't really willing to put in the work required to succeed, and they ignore the fact that distributed teams have their own distinct kind of benefits.
And it's okay, you know, if that's the way you want to run your business, one size doesn't fit all, so it doesn't have to be for every single company. But today we're going to talk about the lessons that we've learned over the years, and we've made a lot of mistakes over the last 6 years specifically that we've been leading teams. And hopefully kind of those lessons will help you to build kind of more successful distributed teams in the future and not having to go through that disruptive path that kind of Yahoo or IBM have had to take on.
And that leads us to part one, which is before going down this path, you need to make a commitment to it. If you don't commit to success, you're likely to fail. Half-hearted efforts are going to result in a worse experience, not a better one. And company leadership has to support the effort. And so in this part, we're going to talk about some of the challenges you'll face going down the distributed team path. And the solutions we found to it, which probably aren't the only solutions, and that'll help you be prepared both at the start when you're proposing this kind of strategy, later when you encounter these challenges and have to deal with them, and then even later when maybe this whole approach is challenged by a new executive or a new investor that might want you to back away from this kind of thing.
And you start by investing in the very, very basics that to us is organizational culture. So Camille was talking a little bit about culture earlier on, and one of the things that we get asked is, but how do you build company culture when you are not working shoulder to shoulder? So a lot of people are really, really skeptical about this, but distributed teams can also have a great culture. It will just be very different from what you know in more collocated teams. So to me, culture has absolutely nothing to do with the physical space you occupy or who you sit next to. To me, it's all about kind of, like we see in this quote, kind of organizational culture. Kind of, it represents the values, the goals that as a team you want to take on. And that has nothing to do with the space that you are sharing. So you can have the best offices, you can have people working shoulder to shoulder, and still have a very toxic culture. So culture is all about the people, your common goals, and the respect for each other. And it's how you interact and how you care about your customers, but ultimately the people that you're working with. In fact, the two companies I've worked for with the stronger cultures, they have invested a lot in distributed teams. And in the case of Living Social, kind of their culture has outlived the longevity of the team. And most of the people who work with us are still in touch day to day and kind of trying to support and help each other even after they've moved away from their team. So culture is built through sharing kind of a journey together, kind of learning from our mistakes together, and respecting and helping each other even when you are not longer together.
Another basic commitment is to invest in the best tools that you can afford. Better tools make communication easy. You start with the simple things. You want good laptops with good cameras, or desktop computers maybe, but I think laptops are better. You want headsets. And you want good software tools for communication, both audio and video or just text chat, document sharing, things like that. Start there and then pay attention as you go to how well the tools are meeting your needs. Make sure that everyone who needs them has access to these tools and knows how to use them. And everyone who needs them really kind of means everybody. If your engineering team has access to, for example, Slack and Jira, but other parts of the company don't, then it'll make cross-functional collaboration among teams much more difficult. At both First and Free Agent, everybody in the company, no matter what their job function, uses and has access to the same suite of tools. You need to commit to having a critical mass of remote team members. If you just have one or two remote people on your team, you'll create friction and resentment that comes from the perception of having special snowflakes who get special privileges. Instead, make it clear that you are focusing on building a distributed team, not a team that happens to have some remote people. And that kind of gets to a terminological issue. The terms local and remote are alienating, and they emphasize a class distinction between two different types of people. And we struggle at Living Social with our distributed culture until we kind of started de-emphasizing those terms and focusing on using the word distributed team, which is why we say that a lot in this talk. Those kinds of little perception issues kind of matter a lot. Now, what constitutes critical mass? Does it have to be a third of the team? Can it just be a quarter? Does it need to be half? It'll differ for different teams, depending on how you already work and what your culture is. And it'll also fluctuate over time. Once you've built up to critical mass and kind of forced the changes in processes and communication procedures and channels, well, if you need to shrink it back down a little bit, that's okay, because everybody's used to working in a distributed style, whether they're in the office or at home. The rule is this: if the remote people feel like second-class citizens, you're not there yet.
And that's what is very important to us, kind of another rule, and is to be able to have as well remote managers. A lot of companies decide that you can't be a team lead, you can't be a manager if you don't work in one of the offices. And for us, that was one of the key, I think it's been one of the key elements that made those teams successful. One, so the manager really understands the issues and takes them very seriously, so you are dealing with the same problems that the rest of the team will have. But secondly, because you can, you get to experience and you get to remove that glass ceiling idea that you can continue progressing as a developer. So if there's a perceived idea that you can progress in your career because of your locality, you will lose those people in your team. This is kind of everyone in the picture are senior directors, engineering managers at Living Social over time. So Glenn in Dallas, myself in Edinburgh, and kind of Evan in LA. And that was, we all started as engineers, and then over the years, we're able to progress and have the opportunity to take other roles in our career. And including the people that are normally in the office in DC, is very important that they also kind of experience that. And kind of our VP of engineering, Ryan, he used to work a couple of days from home. And this is a screenshot that we took from one of the all hands. So every so often, instead of having all hands in the office, we would have them fully remotely so that everybody was able to have the same experience. Or people like Jesse, who used to strategize with us, and Rigby from home every so often as well. And this is what I found one day when we were kind of joining a hangout.
Culture grows through shared experiences. And that's one reason why it's important that that managers are allowed to be remote employees sometimes. And that's why it's important for office-based employees to work from home occasionally, especially on days when they have meetings, so that they get to have the experience of what it's like to join a meeting remotely and some of the challenges there. It builds empathy. It's also important to get people together face-to-face from time to time, and you will be tempted to, since you're spending that money and bringing people to the same place, you'll be tempted to use that time to maximize productivity. But fight that temptation. It doesn't have to all be fun and games, like this picture of free agent people having fun when they're all together. But the best use of that face time is for your team to get to know each other better. It builds empathy and trust and smooths communication channels, and wisely using that time when you're all together to get to know each other makes you much more productive than when you're back apart.
One of the mistakes that we tend to make as well when we think about distributed teams is thinking that we need to treat all employees, whether they are co-located in an office or working from home or elsewhere, equally. You will never be able to treat everybody equally. What you should be aiming to is to treat everybody fairly. So there's always going to be some perks and constraints and benefits that the different people are going to have. And that is okay, as long as you're watching that no one group are benefiting more by the setup. One example that we have is, like if you go, for example, if you are in an office and you go for lunch to discuss just get together with some friends, you probably don't want that conversation to turn out into a strategy meeting and make decisions there. You want to make sure that the people that need to be involved with that conversation are in person, and you need to be very conscious of when you're making those decisions and you are not involving the right people. But also you shouldn't kind of avoid having any social kind of gatherings between people that are quite close together, so you still can go for lunch, you still can have drinks after work if that's what you want to do. You just need to be conscious that you need to create opportunity for the other people that are working from home to have that same opportunity. So at Free Agent, we have, I think it's on Wednesdays, we do coffee time for all the remote employees, so they jump into a hangout and they have a chat, people from different teams. Or at Living Social, after an all hands, we used to get a lot of us together so that we could talk about what had been discussed in the same way that the people that were gathering together in the office were doing.
Part 2, communicate intentionally. And the theme here is that on a distributed team, some kinds of communication don't just happen the way you're used to. Look, people are great at communicating face-to-face. We're so good at it that it happens in all kinds of ways naturally that you probably don't even notice or think about. I mean, think about when you're in an office situation, you notice stressful postures or frowns on faces, or you notice high fives and celebrations and signs of success. you might pick up on the fact that those two people are talking together a lot lately. Or you'll notice particular reference books out on colleagues' desks that weren't there last week. You'll overhear conversations around you or on the way to the break room or by the lift. All of those things are ways that you naturally pick up on what's going on in your team. And those don't happen in a distributed team. You have to compensate in two ways. You should plan explicitly for disseminating certain kinds of information to make sure that people know what's going on in the team. And you should also make opportunities for people to get together, local people with remote people and so forth, and remote people together to have that kind of serendipitous conversation that you would have in an office environment. Now, this might make it seem like just a lot of extra work, but there are problems with that implicit casual communication that happens in a co-located office environment as well. Some of the time, the right people aren't always involved in an impromptu hallway conversation that leads to an important decision. A lot of the time, you'll not convey that and disseminate that decision or those changes as widely as they should within the organization because you kind of assume that all the right people already know. And most of the time, the rationale and thought process that went into that decision is lost. And in a distributed environment, you can put in the work to explicitly think about those processes and what kind of communication needs to happen, and make that happen and write it down and preserve it. And let's face it, every organization could benefit from having some explicit thought and planning and intention around their communication processes.
And focusing on your communication strategy and how you share information across the company is not just important to get your job done. A big part of why we communicate and how we interact to each other is to start building that trust between the people that are working together. So Camille was mentioning about that as well, is how do you create a culture of trust? It's a culture where people can be vulnerable with each other and they trust that even when they make mistakes, somebody's going to be there to help them out and to see through the problems that you're trying to do. Patrick Lencioni, in his books, like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, etc., he talks about absence of trust being the primary problem with dysfunctional teams. So when we trust each other, we can be vulnerable with each other, and when we're vulnerable, we admit our mistakes, ask for help, tap into one another's skills and experiences more easily. So as a manager, when you are trying to build a very cohesive team, most of your efforts should really be around building that trust. And trust is important at different levels, so it's important going downwards with your team, upwards, and outwards with other parts of the organization. So we were talking earlier on, kind of in other topics, about one-on-ones. So one-on-ones are an important way to compensate for losing some of that accidental communication of an office environment. In one-on-ones, you get a chance to really, truly get to meet the people in your team and really get to understand if they are struggling with anything. Are they feeling isolated? Are they feeling detached? Do they know what's happening? And that's especially important in distributed teams because you won't bump into those people in the kitchen or in the elevator. You will have to be seeking kind of those clues. And a lot of people might not be kind of that proactive to reach out to you and come up with those problems. So you need to make sure that you're always checking with your team and you don't let any problems to brew for too long. And that's, the one-on-ones with your team are extremely important, but what we found is that those ones are equally important with other parts of the organization, other people that depend on the work that you are doing and your team is doing, and is important that you start talking and that you have time to spend with other stakeholders, whether it is product managers, kind of if you work on some finance tools, that you're talking to the finance team, with marketing, that you start really building those relationships. And you're not going to be able to go for lunch with them or just have a quick chat kind of when you're getting to your desk. You're going to have to explicitly set time to get to know those people and understand what their problems are. And if they have you in mind and they know that you care about what they're trying to achieve, they will involve you in the conversations that will help make your team more successful. And you can do that very easily. Kind of, for example, you can build rapport with people kind of in other organizations, just with a simple, this is a hangout with Steve. He used to be one of our directors of product at Living Social. And when I jumped into the call, that was all it took for him to put me in a good mood and put a smile on my face. So there's little things that even if you are not next to each other can do to kind of start building that great relationship. And I always say that kind of out of sight should never be out of mind. You need to make sure that you are always in the minds of those people that depend on you or that you depend on.
Still on the topic of communication, we've talked about good tools, but internet audio and video tools can be finicky, and as a leader, it's worth your time to learn to be good at those and learn the ins and outs and be ready to help people debug those and make meetings run smoothly. You don't want meetings that involve remote people to seem like they turn into extra hassle because of this kind of stuff. Next. Also, whenever you can, prefer video to just an audio-only channel. One-on-one, it conveys so much more personality and meaning and lets people get to know each other better. And especially in meetings when some of the participants are in the same room, it's really underappreciated how much video adds. Just seeing faces helps remote people to put names and faces with voices. Seeing facial expressions and lip movement can make voice over a kind of noisy audio channel much more intelligible. And even just seeing who the other people in the room are looking at helps you follow the flow of the meeting and stay more engaged. Choose the right communication channel for each situation. Camille talked earlier about synchronous versus asynchronous communication, where you have to coordinate and everybody be together for a synchronous meeting, but chat sometimes or group chat or email is more asynchronous. And she also talked about bandwidth, text channels and audio and video being the highest bandwidth and conveying the most information in real time. And there's one other dimension I think of, which is persistent versus ephemeral. Some ephemeral channels, you have the conversation and then it's gone in a short while. Persistent channels stick around, they can be reviewed, sometimes they're searchable. The communication channels we have exist in space along all three of these axes, and they're suitable for different purposes because of those different characteristics. When you're exploring an issue that you don't understand very well, you want very fluid, real-time interaction with a lot of people bouncing ideas off of each other. So you want a synchronous channel and preferably a high bandwidth one like a video conference or everybody getting in a conference room together. When you just have a question that you think somebody might know the answer to, fire it off in group chat, and whoever knows when they see it can respond, and you're not interrupting people. And other people can get the benefit of seeing that as well, and it'll be searchable later. If you want to disseminate some communication about change in your organization, you should probably use a persistent text channel to make it available later, searchable, unambiguous. Maybe introduce it with a meeting and a presentation, but have it out there in a persistent text channel.
And being remote also doesn't mean that you have to give up on stand-ups, retrospectives, sprints, demos. There's solutions out there for all of us to be able to run those efficiently, and those are normally the first things that people kind of think that you should be dropping. But these are a great opportunity to build that social connection between the people in your team. And you can see here, for example, Sarah, You can see here, for example, Sarah was a big part of kind of the culture that we were building kind of at Living Social. And we were able to kind of get to know each of those people and what they brought to the table through those demos, kind of show kind of be able to learn from each other and get to kind of, if you're a little bit kind of out there, you can do like Caius at Living Social, put a little bit of your personality every time that you do those things.
Finally, even if you do everything that we've already said, it will still cause problems if the people on the team don't understand how the team works and is supposed to work. And so as a leader, it's your job to provide clarity around those things. Here are a few issues where it's important to be clear. The first is about how work is measured and evaluated. One of the good things about a distributed team is that managers have to learn to evaluate work by, actual progress, not perceptions of busyness, like it should be. And so it's important to be clear about how work will be measured and evaluated and what the criteria are, and review that with the people frequently.
You also need to be very clear about what jobs are close to remote workers, and ideally none of them will be, but in some circumstances you might decide that maybe people that are less experienced should be in the office kind of interacting with other people until they build some of those skills and kind of best working practices. Sometimes it happens as well with very senior leadership roles where they have to kind of collaborate and interact with a lot of other people in the company that maybe are not as accustomed to work in a distributed fashion. A few other things that we've learned over the years that is very important that you have into account is kind of knowing, for example, kind of understanding based on location, what people you can or cannot hire. So not having a good understanding of different countries' intellectual property, employment, and tax laws can get you into a lot of trouble down the line. So you might end up hiring somebody earlier on in kind of your company, and later on you realize that maybe those countries have very specific laws about intellectual property that become a risk when you're trying to get a funding round or go for an IPO, etc. So you want to make sure that you have done your work ahead of time, because if you then have to let those people go because you are not willing as a company to take that risk, you're going to create a lot of disruption with the team, for yourself, but more specifically with the person affected by those changes. And the same goes for your budget. Kind of you need to have a very, very good understanding of the cost of running a distributed team. So what is going to be the cost of the tools now, and when the team grows, what is going to be the cost if you need to provide kind of a setup for the house, or if they go to co-working spaces. But most importantly, what is going to be the cost of getting all those people to travel to the office and come and meet together. And when things go well, that's all great, but when there's trouble, those are normally the first things that you will cut, that you'll try to kind of reduce, and that can be very devastating for distributed teams. So one of the things that I try to do there is to assign the budget for travel for those people to their compensation. It's not part of their compensation, but is kind of in our books. This is the cost of employing somebody that is going to be working remotely, and that is not a specific budget that gets attached, for example, to the travel, kind of the company travel budget. And the same with the salaries. Having a very clear salary strategy, depending on the location, will save you a lot of trouble later on down the line. And you should be setting all these clear expectations from day one. And day one is when you start advertising for those roles and you start to talking to these people to join your company.
So we've been talking for a while now about all the challenges you'll face and showing you our battle scars. But we are fans of distributed teams, and we want to end on a more positive note. So here are just a few things. Living Social was able to build an extremely talented and tight engineering team that went from 12 people to over 100 in less than a year, in large part because we cast a wide geographic net. A distributed team strategy can be a strategic advantage. That's especially true if your company is located outside of a major tech center, but it's also true if you're inside a tech center. Those cities are usually expensive, and there's a lot of competition for good employees. A distributed team strategy can reduce costs, even if you factor in the travel stuff. And retention for remote employees is often sky high, and that's really valuable. A distributed team strategy can make certain kinds of change easier. Once everyone on the team is working in a distributed style, it's easier to organize teams more dynamically and fit the team structure to the work. In traditional organizations, Conway's law here is a constraint. In a distributed organization, it can be used as a tool. You still want to be careful because you don't want people to be treated as interchangeable parts, but it is easier to reorganize teams as needed and fit them to the structure of the work that you need to do. And finally, even as I said when we were discussing communication strategies, that may seem like a lot of extra work, but every organization could benefit from putting a lot more focus on explicit and deliberate communication.
And finally, a distributed team strategy can potentially help you to build a more diverse team. It is not a silver bullet, but it can be a powerful tool by removing certain barriers and providing extra flexibility for those that need it most. So in my case, 6.5 years ago, this happened to me. A little lovely bundle of joy. And at the time, I was commuting every day to an office. After a few months of maternity leave, I went back to work and really struggled with the fact that I wasn't getting to see my little boy. So my husband and I started to decide what we were going to do, and one of the options was going part-time. At the time, I was able to have the opportunity to join the Living Social team, working full-time from home, and that allowed us to really be able to spend time in the mornings with my little boy, and then be able to work a full day, kind of the rest of the day. And I am 100% sure that my career would have been in a very different place today had I not had kind of this opportunity. And this is applicable not only to mothers. This is applicable to anyone that needs that little bit of extra flexibility because, for example, they are the main carers of people. Or maybe they have a disability and they find it difficult to be able to commute to an office. But it's being able to work from home is not enough. You need to have an environment where they support this, because otherwise you will be the person that everybody else resents if everybody needs to bend the where they work to you, to that specific person. So if you only take one thing away from this talk, please let it be that as a leader, it's your responsibility to try as hard as possible to make everyone that works with you successful. The same way that my manager here, he's going to kill me for this later on, he's over there, had a huge influence in my career and was able to first give me the opportunity to work, but also be able to kind of be successful and promote, kind of continue moving on in my career. But we don't want to finish this talk without doing a little tribute. So one of the people at Living Social that really understood how it worked, kind of what this power that we have at team leads to make a huge impact in people's lives, was Travis Valentine. He was the most kindest and caring engineer, kind of team lead that you will ever find. Travis passed away last week unexpectedly, and with him, he took a little bit of all of our hearts. But we wanted this to be a tribute to him because he was the person that we should all kind of consider as an example of what it means to being inclusive and helpful and making your team successful. Thank you very much.
This presentation was built in Dallas and Edinburgh, and we enjoyed giving it to you today. Thanks.